If you enjoyed this podcast, please consider liking, sharing, and subscribing to the channel. Sharing it with your friends and family helps spread knowledge, and when we help others grow, we grow too. Thank you so much for listening. Let's dive into the podcast. The Secret Order, MKUltra begins, 1953. The year was 1953. Behind closed doors in Langley, Virginia, CIA Director Allen Dulles sat at his mahogany desk, his face grave with concern. Reports had been flooding in from Korea. American prisoners of war were returning home changed, speaking in strange ways about their captors. Some refused to come back at all. Dulles knew something terrible was happening. The Soviets had found a way inside the human mind. They could make people say things, believe things, do things against their will. The Cold War had taken a frightening new turn. In a small, windowless conference room, Dulles met with his most trusted advisors. The conversation was hushed, urgent. "We're falling behind," one official whispered. "The Russians are already using these techniques. The Chinese too. Our soldiers don't stand a chance." The men around the table nodded grimly. They had seen the reports. American servicemen confessing to war crimes they never committed. Others praising communist ideals they once despised. The enemy had weaponized the mind itself. Dulles made a decision that would haunt the agency for decades. "We need our own program," he said quietly. "Something bigger, something secret." And so MKUltra was born. The project began with a simple code name and an unlimited budget. Dulles signed the authorization papers on April 13, 1953. No congressional oversight, no public knowledge. Even most CIA employees would never know it existed. The goal was clear, but terrifying. Learn to control the human mind completely. Make people forget. Make them remember things that never happened. Turn enemies into friends with a pill or an injection. Dr. Sidney Gottlieb, a brilliant chemist with a stutter and a club foot, was chosen to lead the program. He understood the urgency. Soviet brainwashing techniques were already being used in Korea. American intelligence needed to catch up, and fast. The authorization document was brief but chilling. It gave permission to experiment on unwitting subjects, people who would never know what was being done to them. Hospitals, universities, prisons, all became potential testing grounds. Gottlieb assembled his team in complete secrecy. They worked in unmarked buildings, used fake names, destroyed records daily. Even their own colleagues couldn't know the truth. The race to control the human mind had begun, and ordinary people would pay the price. Unwitting subjects, dark experiments revealed, 1953 to 1964. The people never knew what was coming. Ordinary citizens walked into hospitals for simple treatments. Soldiers reported for routine duties. Students signed up for research studies promising easy money. None of them understood they had become test subjects in a twisted game of human control. Dr. Ewan Cameron ran his experiments at Montreal's Allen Memorial Institute. Patients arrived seeking help for depression or anxiety. Instead, they found themselves trapped in a nightmare they could never have imagined. Cameron called it psychic driving. He would play the same recorded message hundreds of times while patients lay helpless, their minds slowly breaking apart. The drugs came without warning. LSD slipped into coffee cups, cocktails laced with unknown chemicals. Hospital patients received mysterious injections during routine visits. Many subjects experienced terrifying hallucinations that lasted for days. Some never fully recovered. The researchers watched and took notes, treating human beings like laboratory rats. Frank Olson knew too much. The CIA scientist had seen the dark side of the program firsthand. On November 28, 1953, Olson attended a retreat with his colleagues. Someone spiked his drink with LSD without telling him. Days later, he fell from his hotel window in New York City. The official story claimed suicide. His family suspected murder. The experiments spread across the country like a hidden plague. Mental hospitals, prisons, universities, and military bases all became testing grounds. Researchers used electroshock therapy until patients lost their memories completely. They locked people in sensory deprivation chambers for weeks. Some subjects endured temperature extremes that pushed their bodies to the breaking point. The most disturbing part was the complete lack of consent. These were not volunteers who understood the risks. They were unwitting victims, chosen because they seemed vulnerable or expendable. Prisoners could not refuse. Mental patients had no voice. Military personnel followed orders without question. Children were not spared from these horrors. Young patients in psychiatric facilities became subjects in cruel experiments. Orphans and disabled children faced particular danger because few people would notice if something went wrong. The researchers showed no mercy for age or innocence. Years later, when fragments of the truth emerged, investigators found destroyed documents and missing files. The full scope of the program may never be known. How many people suffered? How many lives were destroyed? How many families lost loved ones to these secret experiments? The questions hang in the air like ghosts, demanding answers that may never come. What happened in those hidden rooms remains one of the darkest chapters in American history. The Montreal experiments, Cameron's controversial pursuit, 1957 to 1964. In Montreal, Canada, a respected psychiatrist received mysterious funding from a source he never questioned. Dr. Donald Ewan Cameron ran the Allen Memorial Institute, a place meant to heal troubled minds. But behind closed doors, something far darker was taking shape. The money came through fake organizations with harmless names. Cameron believed he was conducting groundbreaking research. He called his methods de-patterning and psychic driving. These words sounded scientific, but they hid terrible truths. Patients entered the institute seeking help for depression or anxiety. Instead, they became subjects in experiments that would haunt them forever. Cameron believed he could erase damaged minds completely, then rebuild them from scratch like blank slates. The process began with what he called sleep therapy. Patients were kept unconscious for weeks, sometimes months. They received powerful drugs that kept them in a dreamless void. Their families were told this would help them heal. While patients slept, Cameron applied massive doses of electricity to their brains. The shocks were far stronger than normal treatments. Some patients received them 3 times daily. Their memories began to vanish like smoke. When patients finally woke, they could not remember their own names. They had forgotten how to speak, how to use a bathroom, even how to eat. Cameron saw this as success. The old mind was gone. Next came the rebuilding phase. Patients lay in dark rooms with speakers beside their heads. The same messages played over and over, 16 hours a day. "You are a good wife and mother," repeated endlessly. "You will be confident and strong." Some heard these phrases 250,000 times. The human mind, stripped bare, had no choice but to absorb whatever it heard. But something was wrong with this plan. The new personalities never stuck properly. Patients emerged as shadows of themselves. A woman forgot her children's faces. A man lost 25 years of memories. They walked and talked, but the spark that made them unique had been extinguished. The CIA watched from a distance. They wanted to know if minds could be controlled, erased, or rebuilt. Cameron's work gave them answers, though not the ones they hoped for. Years passed before anyone questioned what happened in Montreal. When the truth finally surfaced, families wept for loved ones who had entered the institute as whole people, but left as broken fragments. Cameron never realized he was part of something called MKUltra. He died believing his work was medical progress. The patients he treated carried scars that would never heal. living proof of what happens when science abandons its sacred duty to do no harm. Destruction of the evidence. The Helms Purge, 1973. The year 1973 brought danger to the CIA's darkest secrets. Director Richard Helms felt the walls closing in around him. Watergate had shaken Washington to its core. Reporters dug deeper into government lies. Congress asked harder questions. Helms knew what investigators might find if they looked too closely at MKUltra. The experiments on unwilling patients, the drugs given without consent, the broken minds left behind. These files could destroy careers and send people to prison. So he made a choice that changed history forever. On a cold January morning, Helms picked up his phone. He called the records division with simple instructions. Destroy all MKUltra files. Every document, every report, every piece of evidence that showed what they had done. The order moved through CIA offices like wildfire. Workers gathered boxes of papers. They fed them into shredders until the machines overheated. They burned documents in basement furnaces. They turned years of research into ash and ribbons of paper. But Helms had made one critical mistake. He forgot about the money trail. Hidden away in a separate building, financial records sat untouched. These dry accounting papers seemed worthless to most people. Bills for laboratory equipment, payments to hospitals and universities, checks written to doctors whose names meant nothing to clerks. These boring financial files would become the only proof that MKUltra had ever existed. When investigators finally arrived, they found empty filing cabinets, clean desks, missing records. The CIA claimed they had never heard of most programs that victims described. Without documents, how could anyone prove what had happened? Years later, a sharp-eyed researcher stumbled across those forgotten financial records. Suddenly, investigators had names, dates, and amounts. They could trace money flowing to secret projects across the country. But the damage was already done. The most detailed records were gone forever. Scientists' notes about their experiments had vanished. Patient files had disappeared. The full scope of MKUltra would remain hidden. Helms had succeeded in his goal. He protected the CIA from complete exposure. But he also created a new mystery. What exactly had they been trying to hide? What secrets were so dangerous that they had to be erased from history? The few surviving documents raised more questions than they answered. Each recovered file only hinted at larger truths that had gone up in smoke. Today, researchers still search for missing pieces of this puzzle. They know something terrible happened, but the complete picture remains lost in the ashes of Helms' desperate decision. Exposure on Capitol Hill, Hearings and Surviving Truths, 1975 to 1977. The massive wooden doors of the Senate hearing room opened to a world that had been hidden for 20 years. It was 1975, and America was about to discover what their government had really been doing in secret laboratories across the country. Senator Frank Church sat behind the long mahogany table, staring at stacks of paper that seemed to tell impossible stories. These were the fragments that survived, pieces of a puzzle that someone had tried very hard to destroy. Most of the MKUltra files had been burned in 1973, but enough remained to paint a chilling picture. The first witness took his seat. His hands shook slightly as he adjusted the microphone. He had been there, he said. He had seen the experiments. Doctors giving drugs to patients who never agreed to it. People locked in rooms, hearing the same voice over and over for weeks. Children used as test subjects. But when the senators asked the CIA officials what they knew, something strange happened. These powerful men, who had run America's most secret operations, suddenly could not remember anything. "I have no memory of that," became their favorite phrase. It happened so often that reporters started counting. The officials who did speak painted MKUltra as a small program that got out of hand. Just a few rogue scientists, they claimed. Nothing that came from the top. But the surviving documents told a different story. They showed approval from the highest levels, money flowing for years, programs in universities, hospitals, and prisons. Dr. Ewan Cameron's name came up again and again. His work in Montreal. Patients who entered his hospital as themselves and left as empty shells. Families who watched their loved ones disappear into living ghosts. Unable to recognize their own children, the American public watched these hearings on television. They saw grown men claim they could not remember programs that cost millions of dollars. They heard about their own citizens used as guinea pigs. The anger was real, and it spread quickly. Yet even as the hearings continued, everyone knew they were only seeing part of the truth. For every document that survived, 10 others had been destroyed. For every witness who spoke, others stayed silent. The senators asked tough questions, but they could only work with what they had. The reforms that followed felt small compared to what had been revealed. New rules, new oversight, new promises, but the deeper questions remained unanswered. How many people had been damaged? What other programs existed? How far had the experiments really gone? The hearings ended, but the mystery lived on, buried in classified files that might never see the light. Lingering shadows, victims, settlements, and unanswered questions, 1977 to present. The truth about MKUltra came out in 1977, but the real fight was just beginning. Survivors crawled out of the shadows, broken and desperate for answers. Their stories were almost too horrible to believe. In Canada, families discovered their loved ones had been used as test subjects without ever knowing it. Ewan Cameron had destroyed minds at the Allen Memorial Institute in Montreal. Patients who came for simple depression left as empty shells. The CIA had funded these experiments through fake research grants. One woman went in for treatment after her baby died. She came out unable to remember her own children. Another man lost 25 years of memories in just 2 months of treatment. These were not volunteers. They were innocent people seeking help. The lawsuits started slowly. The government fought back hard. They claimed national security. They said the records were too old. They made every excuse possible to avoid paying for the damage they had caused. But some victims refused to give up. In 1988, the Canadian government finally agreed to pay settlements. It was not enough money to fix broken lives, but it was proof that the experiments really happened. The American victims faced a harder battle. Courts threw out their cases. The CIA said too much time had passed. They pointed to destroyed files and claimed they could not prove what happened. Justice felt impossible to find. Today, huge gaps still exist in what we know. The CIA admits they burned most MKUltra files in 1973. Was this just standard cleanup, or was someone hiding the worst secrets? We may never know. Conspiracy theories grew wild in this empty space. Some people claim MKUltra never really ended. They point to strange government programs that still exist today. Others believe the mind control experiments worked better than anyone admits. The government stays mostly quiet about these questions. When reporters ask for more files, they get pages covered in black ink. Every important detail gets erased before the public can see it. What we do know is frightening enough. The CIA spent millions trying to control human minds. They used drugs, torture, and surgery on people who never agreed to be part of any experiment. Some victims died. Others lost their sanity forever. The legal battles continue today. New documents still surface occasionally, usually by accident. Each one reveals fresh horrors from this dark chapter of history. The question remains, how many other secrets are still buried in government vaults? MKUltra was only what we managed to discover by chance.